We will reconvene the 76th meeting of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission at shortly after 1 o'clock on September 4th. We had not fully completed the Ombudsman report, although we got some of the good stuff out of the way, but Ombudsman Ziemba, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. So we continue to work with all communities and applicants, and we get numerous questions that are posed to the Commission. Some of these questions are posed by groups that are opposing facilities in various regions of the Commonwealth. We try to answer those questions to the best we can. I'll give you a couple examples of recent questions that we received. For example, one group was questioning whether or not the local ballot summary should make room for opposing viewpoints that have been offered by opposition groups or others. What we did is we responded to that group by stating that the determination of what is included on the ballot summary is a matter for local authorities. Under the statute, that decision is given to the city solicitor, and the city solicitor is in charge of making sure that they include what is included on the ballot.
The statute doesn't say anything about including negative arguments, does it?
It does not.
Yeah, right, okay.
It does not.
Provide a concise summary of
Yeah.
host
I
community agreement.
think in general, part of our answer for all of these groups, because they will be appropriately reviewing the local process, appropriately questioning the local process, to the degree that they're getting answers from the locals. We encourage that, but again, there is a process with which we envision that will occur, arguably, but it's after the applications have been sent to the Commission for many of these arguments and questions and concerns to be raised to the Commission as part of our review process. They may or not be as timely in the minds of the potential opposition group as they may want them, but that is an opportunity for groups to weigh in. For example, one of the other questions that we received recently was whether or not if a community receives a payment pursuant to a host community agreement in advance of the election, is that appropriate or is that not appropriate? I think that the Commission has weighed in that the determinations regarding the host community agreement, its timing and payments are a matter of local concern, unless there's something that is otherwise inappropriate under law or under our regulations. So these are some of the questions that we've received lately by some of the groups that are weighing in on various proposals, and I just wanted to inform the Commission of that.
Well, I appreciate being informed, and you know, I do err on the side of involving us rather than not, if for no other reason than we want to be deferential to minority views who are probably going to be underrepresented, underfinanced, and so forth. So we want to make it clear to people that we really do hear and think these things through. So do keep us informed, and as I say, err on the side of involving us rather than not.
I will.
Yeah.
One other matter, at our previous meeting, there was a question regarding the applicant in Tewksbury and the scheduled election. We've reviewed that matter and report that we don't believe that any action by the Commission is necessary today on that matter. To the degree that any situation changes, we could certainly advise the Commission, but right after our meeting the following day, the town voted to pull back on the election and cancel the election. So for our purposes, at this point, we don't recommend any action. That's the conclusion of my report.
Okay, and you'll follow up sorry, excuse me. You'll follow up this afternoon and tomorrow with Boston and Wynn and let us know. We now, for other purposes, have a meeting Friday afternoon, and if it looks like they're just not going to talk, then we could move very quickly and decide this Friday afternoon if we had to. I mean, we've said that we'll give them to the end of the week, and we will, I think, unless you tell us it's just not happening.
Decide on the next steps, correct? Is that a fair statement?
Pardon?
We could decide on Friday about the next steps, not necessarily decide on the
Well, or we
issue.
could decide it if we wanted to. I mean,
not sure we could, but we could certainly decide on the next steps.
Yes.
And if the next steps include deciding it,
Then so be it.
Good point. Thank you. I like that. There's always somebody with some wisdom in the group. Okay,
Collectively.
thank you very much. Next up is Executive Director Day with a general administrative update.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my administrative report today actually just includes 2 items. And one of those is our recommendations on our final advisors. And the second part is a review of the evaluation process. From the aspect of under tab 4.1, I guess it would be, there are 2 recommendations from the procurement teams about evaluation advisors. One of those is, get there. One of those is a recommendation for HLT Advisory as our economic development consultant. And the second one is McFarland and Johnson as our building site design and mitigation consultant. Both recommendations are individual. There's different wording in both. So my suggestion would be, and I'm hoping to defer to Commissioner Stebbins for referral to each of those specific recommendations for the commission to consider whether or not to approve today. Commissioners?
Thank you, Executive Director. You have before you a recommendation from the group that reviewed the responses for the Economic Development Consultant, and we're recommending the Gaming Commission accept the proposal submitted by HLT Advisory, Inc., pursue contract negotiations and detailed scoping of the services described in the RFR dated August 7, 2013. Furthermore, the PMT recommends the Commission pre-qualify the Center for Policy Analysis and the team of REMI/Spectrum Gaming to provide services to the Commission if needed. And finally, the PMT recommends the Commission extend the pre-qualification of the same firms to provide services to any host and or surrounding community that may so choose as part of their efforts to negotiate and or evaluate agreements with applicants subject to executing a letter of agreement with the respective applicant. Just a note, obviously HLT, we've heard the name before, they have been selected as our financial consultants. They made a very interesting note about some of the crossover between financial information that will be submitted as part of the application, as well as the economic development information that will be submitted as part of the RFA2 application. But we were very impressed with all 3 teams that came in for the oral presentations. I do want to thank Gordon Carr, who's an economic development consultant to the Commission, as well as Dr. Lynn Brown, a former Vice President and Economic Advisor of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, for assisting me on the review team.
Great. I guess we need a motion on this one, right?
Correct.
Any discussion before we move forward?
I can offer
Commissioner
the motion as you see it printed in the memorandum from Director Glovsky and myself.
A second?
Second.
second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Looking forward to getting to know these folks. And you have another one, Commissioner Stebbins.
Certainly. You see in the packet a recommendation for the building site design and mitigation consultant. We had oral interviews with 4 of the respondents, Commissioner McHugh, myself, and John Nunnery from AIA, the Boston Society of Architects, were on the review team. At this point, we are recommending the proposal submitted by the McFarland Johnson team for advisory services for the Category 2 evaluations. Furthermore, the procurement team recommends that as a condition of awarding the contract to McFarland Johnson that members of the team will cease work for Mohegan Sun until the team has completed all the work for the commission, or December 31st, 2013, 13, whichever comes later. The commission will also be posting a procurement to secure similar services for the Category 1 evaluations. As we went through this process, we were hoping to find a consulting team. We had a number of submittals from various respondents who were looking to tackle a piece of the evaluation, but not the complete team approach that McFarland Johnson presented. So what we will be doing is going back out with an RFR to see if we can secure a consultant to help us review the applications on building site design and mitigation for the Category 1 applications, which are due at the end of the year. We obviously have sufficient amount of time to post this new RFR and review the responses and hopefully make a selection. But as with all of these RFRs, we've certainly asked applicants to, or respondents to, identify any potential conflicts of interest they have. And we found a couple that popped up in this particular RFR that we decided McFarland Johnson was well suited to do the Category 2 evaluation. They have offered to do that. And certainly would allow them the opportunity to apply or respond to the new RFR that we're going to put out. But at this time, we're just securing their services for the Category 2 evaluation.
Questions, or you were involved in this, right?
No, this is a full-service firm. It is fully equipped with all the competencies necessary to perform the building site design review, including civil engineers, architects, and the like. And but they are doing work for Mohegan Sun, and so that was what led us to conclude that they couldn't have the whole package.
And there was no other, obviously there was nobody else that you thought was up to snuff?
The other respondents, I would suggest, offer the complete team of skills and experiences necessary. We had certainly drafted the original RFR to try to be inclusive of any firm that was interested in doing the work. And certainly Compass allows us to identify interested parties just looking to do one piece of the work. But the RFR that we're going to reissue will ask for a complete team proposal, similar to what McFarland Johnson offered.
Basically the same thing over again, just for Category 1.
No, it's going to be different. There was some confusion, as Commissioner Stebbins said, on the part of some of the respondents as to whether we wanted them to put together a team.
Oh, I see. Okay, I missed that.
Or whether we would put together a team from the bidders who bid for part of the work. So the new RFR will say we want a team, come to us with a complete team.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll get some of the same people back with a complete team, because there were some good ones.
Okay.
We were also warned about trying to marry potential applicants and parties together that may not want to work together.
What is the, I don't quite follow the, why do we say that they can't work for Mohegan until, I don't know why December 31st is, but what's the conflict? Or they're only working on Category 2?
Yeah, that was going to be my question.
Again, the initial RFR was to do building site design and mitigation review for both Category 1 and Category 2 applicants. McFarland and Johnson identified a current or ongoing relationship with Mohegan Sun, and we just thought it was expedient to just select them to do the Category 2 evaluation again, which they agreed to do, and again would reissue the RFR for the Category 1 evaluations.
Right, but
There really isn't any conflict, but they were asked not to do it, and they agreed not to do it, and they're going to sign a contract saying that they won't do it. There really isn't any conflict.
okay. As if they're willing to do it.
So could they respond to do on the next RFR if they were willing to do only Region A, for example?
That's something that we really have to think through as to whether their past work and the expectancy future work. Expectancy being a loaded word there, and
Right.
we'd have to figure that out, as to whether they would be conflicted out of the other work.
But Commissioner Zuniga said Eastern Mass.
Region A,
Region A.
where they would not be evaluating anybody
I'm
else
sorry,
besides Mohegan
there's
and
somebody,
its
there's
competitors.
somebody on their team who did work for Foxwoods, isn't that right?
Correct.
Commissioner?
Okay.
So there's a sort of a double whammy.
They
That's
straddled- they
less,
straddled too.
that was less troublesome. We'll certainly pursue that, I think, and see if they can do some more work for us.
And this is where I'm coming from. September 6th is the day after tomorrow, and it's good that we're going to clarify that piece of the RFR about wanting comprehensive teams. But it's usually very helpful to do outreach prior to the issuance of an RFR, to have informational meetings, to to have our consultants meet with other consultants, to start spreading the word, if you will, about what we want, which, in my view, ensures a better response. Just posting another RFR may actually get us less responses, because people are not necessarily always, they don't necessarily get an immediate notification that an RFR has been posted. That's a little bit, and all this means is maybe we don't shoot for September 6th and try to do a lot of what I just suggested in the next coming days before posting the new RFR.
I think that's a very valid suggestion. I think we'll obviously communicate the reissuance, as Commissioner McHugh suggested, to the folks that participated the first round, and are encouraged now to organize teams. I think this obviously was issued prior to us having an arrangement and contract with Pink and Associates, and certainly talk to them about how we can best promote this and get this out.
Right.
We did, and in addition to that, we did do that before issuing this RFR. The AIA was very helpful to us in doing that. We did reach out to people. We're going to reach out to all the people who responded to this one, and ask them to put together. There were two terrific firms in their area, and one of them said, "We thought you didn't want us to put together a team, but we would have done it had we understood that." So that kind of outreach will certainly be undertaken. The idea is to try and get these people, get this process moving forward, so that we can get the team assembled and ready to go when the new, and maybe act as observers for this process and take away some
Yep.
information. So, but those are all good ideas, and we'll do that.
Yeah, no, and I suggest perhaps, because I remember having seen this RFR, as having seen the versions before, perhaps we could be a little bit more explicit as to what will constitute a conflict, or even the appearance of a conflict, because that's a very broadly misunderstood term, sometimes by the respondents.
Anything else?
No.
You want to?
Sure. I will move that the Gaming Commission accept the proposal submitted by McFarland Johnson team for advisory services for Category 2 evaluations. Furthermore, the procurement team recommends that as a condition of awarding the contract to McFarland Johnson, that members of the team will cease work for Mohegan until the team has completed all work for the commission, or December 31st, 2013, whichever comes later. The commission will post a procurement to secure similar services for Category 1 evaluations by September 6, 2013, or thereabouts.
Or later.
Or later.
Or later.
Second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. It just occurs to me, Commissioner Stebbins, that you have done, taken the yeoman's amount of work on a lot of the interviewing that we've done for people and for consultants, and it's a very labor-intensive process. and we feel very good about the people that we've hired. A lot of that has to do with the work that you've done. It takes forever and the process is long and so forth, but we've done really well, and you've done the lion's share of the work, and I just think we owe you appreciation for that, so.
Happy to do it.
Thanks for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I guess back to Director Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item is a presentation from Pink and Company, our project coordinator for our upcoming license application review process. And Jennifer Pink is here today, and that you'll find that under 4.2 in your notebook. Jennifer Pink is here today to review her team's thoughts regarding the evaluation timeline process and a draft agenda intended to support the planned training for our evaluation teams on September 11th. So with that, I'll just turn it right over to Jennifer. Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. We've been hard at work now for just over 2 weeks interpreting the paper that we've gotten and the regulations and all the stuff that was handed to us in the last couple weeks to come up with a time-efficient and logical approach to reviewing a lot of data in a short period of time. And there's still many questions we have to ask, some of which need to be answered before September 11th, and some which can be deferred, or at least we don't need to know exactly what the answer is until October 4th, when the applications actually roll in. But in the meantime, what I'd like to do is share with you our thinking on how we're going to approach the review process. What I've laid out mostly here is really the steps on the review process. There's still some issues that I know everybody is very aware of, having to do with the ranking or scoring or weighing of the questions, the response to the questions. We've got something in here which is just a draft, as is most of this, but I want to spend a few minutes leading you through how we're thinking about getting the commission, the information you need to select the slot piler licensing. And if you look at the top page here, which is called Level 1, we know that on the meetings, I think it's currently scheduled for December 27th, you're projected to award the slot parlor license after this process, and that we expect there's 3, maybe 4 applications, and they're going to be evaluated in these 5 categories: the general, financial, economic development, building and site design, and mitigation. And we've represented these applications as, I don't know, cans or silos or whatever you want to call them. So applicant A will be evaluated prior to your decision in each of these 5 categories by the 5 teams. And the way the teams are going to work, if you look at the next page, is that each of the commissioners has adopted a category and will review each applicant, all of the applicants in that category. And we've been started some discussions with each of you to understand your thinking behind what the content should be like. What are we looking for when we review these applications? We know what the legislation says about what are the criteria, but there's a lot of information that we're going to get, and we will need to really hone in on what makes for a good application. But we do know each of you has a category, and I know, Mr. Chairman, you've got the general category, also known informally as the WOW, and there'll be a team of people, staff and outside persons, someone from my office, probably myself, on this category. And likewise for each of these, we're gonna have a team of people reviewing. So that this group can review the questions, review, rank, score, weigh the responses, and compare the subcategories between the applicants so that the evaluation team can then deliberate and make your final findings and your assessment of each applicant, which these teams will forward to you, the commissioners. That's the hierarchy of the role as we see it now, as we understand it. I think it's subject to further refinement. That the evaluation team is going to score the categories. No, I don't want to say score right now. Deliberate and make final findings from the teams so that you, as commissioners, can make the final findings of the applicant as a whole. That's the thinking. On the next page, using economic development as an example, the broad category or criteria is economic development. Within that, there are three broad subcategories: job creation, supporting external business and job growth, regional tourism, and attractions. And we see that the evaluation teams are going to look at each one of those individually and the economic development as a whole, comment, and make findings. So that applicant A, applicant B, applicant C, and applicant D will have a summary from the evaluation teams. On the next page, you'll see just sort of deeper into this. This partly has been set up to help us establish a filing architecture so that when all of the reviewers do their work, we've got a system for finding them, assembling them, and using them productively. But you'll see that in each, for supposed applicant A, there are in a certain sub-criteria 3 or 4 questions. The reviewers are going to comment on the response, and we have a proposed system of scoring the quality of the submission right now. And that scoring of the quality submission is based on a preliminary proposal that Commissioner Stebbins, I think, put forth on August 7th, which is in a memo that I have with me. We can talk about it once I get through explaining to you what our thinking is. On the next page, you'll just see more of the mechanics, which is each of the subcategories will have a summary ranking, an individual ranking on each of the questions. And going to the last page, this is really where the heart of the work is. Go to the next page, please. The last page. These are the reviewer's summaries for each question, which will be color-coded, as will, or number-coded to match the requirements in either the legislation or the regulations. Because we've got the matrix, which breaks things out, I think, by yellow, orange, and green, or 3 colors. Because there are some questions that go directly to the legislation or the regulations, and they're exactly worded that way, and then there's others that you have added. So we want to distinguish it when we look at these responses. So here's where the reviewers, which will be the technical consultants, the staff, yourselves, outside experts, and advisors, are going to take the question. In box 1, they're going to describe the applicant approach or response to the question. And then they're going to come up with a statement of findings. We have some work to do to describe, to give some more guidance to the reviewers on what the statement of findings should consist of. I can see that, take a hypothetical example of economic development where some applicant would fund a major new program in a community college, whereas other people would do something not quite as expansive. So a statement of finding might consist of the applicant has committed to a major initiative at a local community college. And that would be a statement of finding that we would consider later when making the comparisons between the applicants, which leads to the recommendation that the teams make, or the assessments that the teams make to you as the commissioners. And then we've got down here the quality of the submission. So this is really the mechanics of it. I think what we say to the reviewers, what we ask them to be looking for precisely in some of these questions is a lot more complicated. Some is quite easy. Number of jobs created. If one is creating a significant more jobs than the others, might be easy to consider that a better or a good submission than someone else. But some of these are very subjective. So this is really where, between now and next Wednesday, we're giving some thought to, and continuing to speak with staff and with some of you about how are we actually going to weight, rank, score, judge, assess the responses. And then we have to figure out how to compare them between the two, or three applicants. So that's where we're at on the process. We've got a lot of work that we're doing. We're going to be setting up a file naming and architecture so that applicants will, I'm sorry, I keep saying applicants, when I mean reviewers will know what system to follow. We're talking with staff about SharePoint, using a section of that for just the reviewers' comments. We're going to be setting up meetings to have pre-application team meetings with each of you and your teams. Got a long list of things that we're working on to get ready for this. We've also got a training outline, which I'll go into a little bit later. And we also have a schedule that I'd like to share with you, but happy to take a pause here and hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you.
Sure. I have a number of questions on these. So maybe I should just take them one at a time by order of pages. Do you anticipate having a member of PINK in each of the 5 teams?
Yes.
So you'd have 5 staff, or including yourself?
Well, this is the way I'm thinking of doing it right now, and I'd love your feedback. I believe I will be the staff person assigned to WOW. Margaret Wood, who interviewed all of the building and site person, will be assigned to building and site, with support from Nancy Stack, who has extensive expertise in the environmental permitting, and I know within that category, so to support her and to support the team. And then for mitigation, which I think you did a procurement for building site and mitigation. The mitigation component that I see McFarland doing and concentrating on most is the traffic mitigation, because that's going to likely be the greatest impact issue. But there's a lot of other stuff in that category, which, having spoken with Commissioner Cameron, she's suggesting that we may play a very useful role in helping assess the mitigation, which is a long way of saying that I will probably participate on that, along with Nancy. And for financial and economic, I think it's going to be Nancy. I think you're going to have Nancy in the office full-time to do this. I don't know if you need 5 staff. I've got them.
And the reason I'm asking this partly is, if that's a constraint, then you become the resource constraint.
Right.
Because
Don't want to do
as
that.
you know, schedule, there's going to be a lot
Yeah.
of work going at the same time.
Yeah.
That was always my general concern about having
Well, I
somebody
think
in
what we're
your role.
going to need, and on my side, is some junior staff to do some logistics, setting up meetings, making sure the paper is going where it's going, and having the more senior staff like Nancy have the discussions that integrate, for example, outside agency reviews, that look for the intersection of issues, for example, between financial and economic development, or economic development mitigation. I think that's going to be very important as we proceed through the process of evaluating the categories independently of each other.
And so
But I do understand your concern, and I don't want to end up being that bottleneck. So I would expect within the next couple of weeks, I will refine that and bring that back to you.
Okay.
Especially as we talk to and bring on board some of the reviewers, who I'm really looking forward to getting some insights. I know HLT has done this extensively for the Canadian government and the provinces. So getting their insights on how to do this, I think, will be very helpful.
And as a follow-up to that, I would encourage everybody to really leverage, you especially, but us, to leverage the increased staff that we have. We started by necessity very lean, but we have grown with additional expertise that fit very well in some of these categories.
And
So-
Rick will be assigning
Right.
a senior person to
each.
at least a senior person to each one of the groups, right?
I have done that.
Yeah.
Already
Yes,
have.
yes, and
Yeah.
I think one thing, as we continue the discussion, and when it comes to the project coordinator, I think the concept behind this is that from Pink and Company's perspective, that their role is that ability to watch the product, so to speak, keeping it moving, to make sure that when we get down to that 84th day or 74th day, we've actually got a product that's going to work for the commission. So from my perspective, that's the primary focus of how does the process go forward, keeping it going forward, keeping it on track. And then I think what's handy now, because Pink also has some expertises, that is the commission is formulating its various teams, that they have the ability to help fill in if the commissioners feel that that would be necessary as well. So, and in that process, I remember we had some discussions about the project coordinators, and to the extent they would need to actually participate with the teams in order to make sure that they provide a kind of an independent opinion back to the commissioners. Is there something missing? How we're doing with time processes and those kind of things. So I think that's the struggle, to get to that level of participation, but not go over the edge and try to actually participate full time at all in the team meetings themselves. So.
Do you anticipate your staff member filling out these forms?
I don't know. I mean, I know that's the one of my questions to you. I mean, I think we, in some areas, yes.
It seems to me that I'm wrestling with this role too.
Yeah.
And if the job is to be a facilitator, which is the way I see it, I wouldn't think you would. I mean, if we're short substantive content review, then we will fill that gap, and it may be that we fill it with a pink person, so
Right.
to speak. Flesh-colored person, but called pink.
Pink employee.
Pink employee.
We call
But-
ourselves pinksters.
Pinksters, okay. But it is, your hesitance on answering the question concerns me because of what I think you said clearly, Rick, that the role is as a facilitator, not as an additional content reviewer, unless and until we have a content problem, in which case we fill it in, but that's kind of on the side. And so that's why I asked the
Well,
question.
the reason why I hesitated is I do think we'll have plenty to do without reviewing all the questions and just keeping the process moving. But one of the things that I think the RFR called for is for the project coordinator to sort of synthesize the findings, if you will. And I don't think that, I think we need to be familiar with the contents. We don't necessarily need to review or assess or mark or score or rank. So I guess that's the
Yeah.
distinction I would make.
Even, can I finish so even on the synthesizing, as I'm thinking about this, individual members of these teams will go off and do their assessment. Then the group, sort of like the procurement process does, then the group will get together and, each, I'll say it was sufficient, I'll say it was insufficient, I'll say it was extraordinary, we'll talk about it, why was it, and then see how it gets synthesized by the group. And eventually the group sort of pulls it into, okay, on balance, So, again, I don't see you as the synthesizer, I see you as the facilitator of the synthesizing
Okay.
process. And it's an important, I think it's an important distinction. And it'll be, you do need to be somewhat familiar with the
Yeah.
content, clearly, to some extent. You probably are, for the most part, already. But being able to keep your hands out of the content and making sure that you're up here, making sure things are flowing. And, I mean, we're asking people to do a whole lot of
We
work.
are.
If we go with these forms, and maybe we will, maybe we won't, but this is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And supporting the folks who do have to do these forms and facilitating that process and shortcutting that process and simplifying that process will be tremendously helpful.
Right.
And I wouldn't want you to get caught up in doing it yourselves.
I was going to ask a related question that is relative to nomenclature, but I think it's important for us to really just get some of these right, because the statute speaks to some of these. And I was going to draw attention to findings and to recommendations. The statute does talk and give us, the commission, the task, as I remember it, of issuing the statement of findings
Right.
overall. And I realize that, that could all be comprised of aggregating all of those findings that happen at each of the teams. But it occurs to me that in the example that you cite, for example, the number of jobs, where the rubber hits the road is whether we believe that those numbers are too aggressive or too conservative or
Right.
just right, and the assumptions behind them. And that's the subjective piece that you speak about,
Right.
because it's all a projection. It can be corroborated on some math, but ultimately, do we trust that it's conservative or aggressive or what? So that's a general thought relative to if we get to that level of detail, to the chairman's point about the forms that have to produce a finding at each one of those subsets, or in your example, the level 3, it may turn out to be a lot of work that we just need to think about. And just couple that with recommendations that teams can clearly produce. They can make assessments and they can, this was going to be my other question, they will look at different proposals side by side and say this appears to be better in this regard, because I have the benefit of comparing them one to the other side, as opposed to trying to look at each one in a vacuum and come up with a label for it, sufficient, outstanding, or not, without the benefit of looking at the comparison.
And I think there's micro views that are going to be necessary, and then there's macro views. And the question is, when do those occur, and how do they occur, so that you aggregate the information in some of these subcategories, for example. Because you've asked questions on a topic in 3 or 4 different ways.
We have.
So what was the point of that?
Well, just to, when do we aggregate it? When do we take the macro view on an applicant's response? We have to look at the response to every question. And that is going to be important information. And the comparison is really where the rubber meets the road in this, in terms of making a recommendation.
Would it be helpful, this approach that you've outlined it strikes me as really labor-intensive but essential. I don't see how we can do it otherwise. But would it make sense just to take a minute to walk through this and talk about it in the context in which things are going to happen? So if we start with the last page, that's really
exactly
the
where
first
we should
step.
start, because
Right.
that's where
Right.
and I think that would be very helpful, because that'll direct us to what are we trying to get out of this review.
And so with respect to the last page, this would be, each individual reviewer would be, as it's presently constructed, each individual reviewer would be doing this and assigning one of these bullet colors, right? What is the?
Bullet colors, oh, these, the bottom, yeah,
These
okay.
little things
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
What is the value of having each reviewer create her own description, answer to question one?
I agree.
Why doesn't question one, why isn't the response and the reviewer's statement of findings, however you want to label that box, the response to the,
Right.
what the applicant has done? My concern, I raise that concern is because you could have 5 different reviewers look at the same response and come up with 5
Yeah.
different answers to question one.
And you could just
Maybe that's
cut and
valuable.
paste the short narrative from the response.
Well, it's just sort of make work.
respondents, the
Yeah, that-
applicants,
I
yeah.
had the same exact question.
Yeah.
and
Right.
Yeah.
I don't see any value in that at all. I mean, so I agree with Commissioner McHugh.
Well, I might, there's one question, because I'm not, and I may have missed it, is, let's say you're a reviewer and you've got a category, when we've been talking about number of jobs. As a team process, it seems like to me there's got to be a way to bring in opinions in order to make some kind of a collective judgment that's from the team, so that I almost think of these as work papers. That I would take a look at those, I would take a look at the applications independently. I would basically jot down what I thought each of these were, and at that time I would bring those in along with everybody else with the team, and we'd sit down and discuss those. I guess it's not unlike sometimes when we're doing an interview and a hiring. We get done with a hiring and we sit down and we'd actually talk about where do you rank that person. It seems like this is more of a method to get that kind of structure, that kind of discussion to the team itself. But ultimately, the product from the team then comes from further down in the process here, where you actually funnel those in and
Yeah,
eventually produce.
I don't disagree with that. It seems to me this is exactly what this does. And so my question is simply, what value in that process does the first box on the last sheet play? The second
box
box is
question.
critical. But what role does the first box play? It seems to me that is just make work.
We don't want to do make work, but it's not enough time. Never.
Now that I agree with that.
Yeah.
Perhaps, and just to further the agreement, perhaps what we may need as the statement of findings is maybe that can be subdivided, say, into what we thought is a strength, what they clearly demonstrated, and because you did allude to. There's some prerequisites of the statute and our regs, and there's others that are not, they're over and above the prerequisite. So perhaps something that has been clearly demonstrated and that's been verifiable. And then maybe something else that's claimed is a promise, is a projection, and we trust it, we verified it, we could, we think it's just right, it's not conservative or aggressive. So thinking about box 2 may be a better, and how to parcel it, whether we see strengths and weaknesses, within those findings might be a better way to, or whether they clearly demonstrated these aspects but not these others.
I have a,
Maybe a better.
what I was thinking is to make quality of submission, for the sake, that's what you're calling it at the moment, make that the first box. Basically, how do you rate this? And the next question is why? And you explain how you come to the decision that it's outstanding, very good, sufficient, or insufficient. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. And if the question is a very factual one with no subjective measures or anything, then you'll just say because this guy had 100 and the other guys had 22, But if there's, I didn't believe the you'll answer the question depending on what the criteria is, but it's a very simple said, how do you rate this and why? That seems to me to be the simplest way to pull this out.
So
You wanna go on the-
if we go to the next one, then, that is what is that?
The sub-criteria assessment? Oh, no, this is trying to, this
Level
is
3.
thinking about the
Level 3.
Level 3,
the review, the comparison.
right. Now, is that each individual
Question?
reviewer's
That was intended to.
a summary of what's on these other sheets?
Well, that can be either each individual reviewers, or you can bring it back to the team to do. And this is my question to us, is how do we want to approach that?
Well, okay.
Because I do
Then-
think the team, an individual reviewer, looking across for applicants, should be able to say, this one clearly stands out for me.
Okay, but what then is that sheet, the one that's up on the board now, and the next one up, are they two different variants
Yes.
of the same thing?
Yes, I think they were a little bit out of order, too. The next one up.
Right,
As review architecture.
This is just for one single applicant category, whereas the other one was reviewing
I see.
across
Well,
applicants, comparing.
It seemed to me that this one then, the one that is the review architecture for each applicant, could be the next logical step up if it were either the team's process of aggregating the individual response sheets or each reviewer's assessment, so that each reviewer would have a shorthand thing in front of her when the team got together.
Yep.
At some point, you're gonna have a team discussion of the individual responses. And the team discussion is going to be somehow an aggregation and coming to a point of commonality for the individual scorings and rankings, right?
Right.
And so this sheet might be that, the way to reflect that. Or it might be each, and maybe the next one down is each individual reviewer's shorthand that she goes into the meeting with the sheets as backup. I don't know.
Well, I think, back to the work, load. I believe what's most valuable clearly is the product the product of the team
Right.
at the lowest level of criteria and categories that we've asked them. Whatever that level is, a finding and a rating, or an assessment and a rating, that's the consensus of the team, in my view, is really, the valuable record. Before that, each team member should be able to be free to use whatever form they need, and they may be, able to use just one like this, and come prepared to do those discussions and say,
So
this is what I
send-
liked.
Send the reviewers away with instructions on how to review and/or rank these responses. What is insufficient? What is outstanding?
No, well, actually, no. I was actually heading on the other direction. Each person makes their own judgment about each subcategory, and comes to discuss them in a series of meetings.
Mhm.
And, the first meeting, they just get through however many they get through, to have a collective write-up and rating of each of the categories. And that's That's the level of record that we now
Okay.
have. Now, I can, as an individual team member, I can, use this form, scribble my notes, go off
But you
memory
need to
if I
bring to
want
the
to.
meetings, the team meetings,
But the record begins, in my view, when the team has formed a collective understanding or agreement as to why this is better or outstanding or insufficient.
That's certainly a way to do it. I mean, and it's a good way to do it. Is there any merit, though, to having an intermediate step there in which the individual scribblings on these sheets are summarized on something that looks like the second one from the bottom for each reviewer? And that could be a mechanical task that one of your staff could even do,
Right.
because it's just copying it onto a summary sheet. And then before the meeting takes place, having these summary sheets circulated to all the different team members. So you could begin to see very quickly where the points of commonality were and where the points of disagreement were, and focus the limited time that we have on the places where we disagree. In other words, if everybody responds to something as outstanding, why do we need to take the time in the room to go through the individual announcements that we all view it as outstanding? We could see that on a piece of paper, we all agree, we go on to the next one. I'm thinking, not that the discussion isn't useful, but that we do have a limited amount of time, and to the extent we can spend the time together focusing on differences and just putting aside points of commonality.
That could very well be a reason for that, but let me mention this from this other angle. These teams will be quite diverse, in the sense that it includes one commissioner, one expert or more on the particular subject matter, one staff, and that's, by the way, I'm going to argue both sides to this. That's probably really good for the discussion. But I would like to think that recording all of these may result in a divergence that's not necessarily that in ratings, that doesn't tell us much. I don't know if I'm explaining myself well. And I'm going to put it in an example. The review of a projection on an Excel spreadsheet in a financial model may be better with the particular team member that has that expertise and is in the thick of that model, that understands the model. And I don't think that every team member is going to be at the same level. Of course, everybody has to understand what are the outcomes of that model, but at some point they're going to have to trust that the team member has made, or members, this could be more than one person, has made a reasonable review of that model and is comfortable with the projections and assumptions behind it.
But I think that's going to happen. I think that's a really good point, but I don't think that suggests anything about what Jim said is a way to proceed. You're in the process. You might decide for a certain category, like a very technical category about downstream value projections or something. You might say, take your group, we want our investment banker to tell the whole group what they think of this. We're gonna take their assessment, and here's what they think of it. Or each interviewer might say, I don't have the data, I don't know how to answer this question. You don't answer every question. Or when you're sitting around and talking about it, some people have hazard guesses, but they weren't very well informed about it, and the group puts more weight in the. Anyway, you could work this out as you go through the process. But as an organizing mechanism, trying to figure out what's the simplest, cleanest way to get our arms around this, I think Commissioner McHugh is right. If you start with this one, what I would suggest changing on this level 3. It seemed to me that this compilation should have you've got the criteria and the applicant in the wrong boxes. Under where you have A, you should have sub-criteria 3.1. And then you'd have, how did I rank A, how did I rank B, how did I rank C, how did I rank D? Then what's B would be sub-criteria 3-2. And how do I rank A, how do I rank B, how do I rank C, how do I rank D? That would give you a comparative
Right.
for each one against all categories, and then you circulate those.
Right.
And where you have consensus, you can send them aside, or, you know, then take it on. But those, as for those steps structured that way, I think, you know, we're on the right track.
Right.
Does that, that makes sense to you
That
too?
makes sense to me too. And then the next one would get to Commissioner Zuniga's point, the one below that one.
Sorry, I should have numbered these, but.
Review architecture, it
Yeah,
says.
review architecture would maybe reflect the group's assessment of each one. That, you wouldn't have to have this whole,
Why wouldn't you just do, if each reviewer does the restructured version of level 3 comparison of criteria across applicants? Yeah, actually, the heading here is right, it's just that the form is
Right.
wrong. You got,
Right.
the heading is right, but you didn't do it, you did applicants across criteria. So each individual fills these out, then you come to the group meeting, you walk through them one by one by one, somebody's recording a bottom line. And so 6 people say we blah, 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 and we've now decided that as a group, we're saying sub-criteria 3.01 is this for A, this for B, this for C, and this for D.
so you use
The
the
same form over again,
Yeah.
I think
but it's a
that's right.
compilated
I think
form.
that's right.
Right.
I think that's right.
So,
I think-
just to be a little devil's advocate, you could have a situation where 4 team members rate something insufficient,
Right.
and, for different reasons, but they're all recorded. And a 5th team member says it's outstanding, and the conclusion is outstanding, because that,
And the conclusion is what?
and then the general consensus after the discussion may be outstanding, because that 5th member, picked up on and was able to convince, and picked up on the assumptions behind it, the model in my theoretical example, et cetera, et cetera. Is that
Sure.
is that okay?
That's all right. Yeah.
And that'll be recorded.
And that would be in your example of where really only the 15th really knew what they were talking about, and everybody agreed.
The power of
That'd be
persuasion.
fine.
And so the underlying things would look very different than the consensus form, so
As long as
that would
we're-
be fine.
Right. So then, once you had compiled this same form the second time on an aggregate basis as opposed to an individual reviewer basis, now the question is, do you need to upstream them one more time, or does it go to the commission like that? Let's see, you would,
Right.
no, I guess there is one more step.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
all right, so then you get to, can we name this page, the one that says level 3, level 3 comparison of criteria across applicants?
Level 3 comparison.
And you have individual and consensus.
Yes.
Right. And it's gonna switch around, you're gonna have, the
Yep.
column is gonna be criteria, and the rows are gonna be applicants. Which is what the header actually says.
Yep.
you're-
Rows are applicants, yep.
And you're gonna use that for individuals, then you're gonna aggregate that to, the consensus, and then, the task force will need to look at all of those consensus decisions on all of these points and figure out an aggregate rating for,
Each of the mega categories,
for each of the mega categories, right,
1 through 5.
right.
Right.
Which would be basically your level 1. Each team would have that.
Right.
And then this would eventually be put together in this final form. So you'd only have, this would be winnowed down to 3 forms,
3 forms, one of which is used twice.
one of which is used twice, right?
Yeah,
You following that?
I think so, yeah.
Think-
No, I need
If
to
not,
take
I mean,
notes too.
I mean,
No, I understand what you're saying, I do, and I wanna, but I wanna go back to, well, keep going on so I can,
well, I think, I mean, from my standpoint, that does it. I mean, the question then, I think, the only remaining question in my mind is when we go to what we now are considering the first form, you know, the reviewers, I'm not sure if summary, yeah, the reviewers' summaries, it's by item. It's the form we redid,
it's gonna be by item.
it's the last, yeah, the last one. How much do we want written into the why?
Right.
We've decided to, essentially, using colloquial language, we're gonna start out by saying, how did you end up rating this data point, and why?
And why?
And what do we want in the why? And how do we aggregate that so that it can, do we expect everybody to read everybody's whys? Is it there just for the record? I'm not sure, but that's the only open question in my mind about this.
Well, in my view and opinion, as much why as we can at the team level is very important. I guess
For sure.
This was,
Yeah,
this
good
was,
point. So when we're, right,
the aggregated level.
right.
But, yeah, I agree with that, but I don't think we need to have everybody read everybody's whys. I think that'll kill us.
That's right.
But we have the whys, A, as a record.
Right.
If we ever have to go back and look at how everybody got there. And secondly, so that at the team meeting, the person who's ranked the thing
Can remember why.
remember why.
Exactly.
Right.
And say it. Because in a lot of the whys, we may never get to them if everybody agrees that the result is outstanding. We may have different ways of getting there, but everybody agrees that it's
But to the
outstanding.
degree we need the information in the whys to, under section 18, kind of do the write-up of findings, I think that's valuable information to collect that.
At the team level.
At the
At the
team
team
level,
level.
at the team level. But
Yeah.
the reason for having that Y box, for
That
those
would be a
criteria, we
resource
have
for
to.
writing up for the findings, that's
Right.
right. That's another reason for it, right.
But that's a why that we don't actually have here. That would be a why on the aggregated version of this. So there would need to be, when the team does the aggregated criteria across applicants, there would need to be, why did we conclude this?
Right,
That's their work
right,
product.
exactly, that's the work product,
Right,
and
that's-
that's,
that's
That's what they
something
need
that
to
we're.
get to do.
Right.
But back to the other whys, the individual whys, I agree with Commissioner McHugh that it will be helpful to remember why you did it,
Right.
and we will have the record. But I think if you specify, bullet points, we're not trying to ask people to write tomes. We're just saying, 1, it was pretty. 2, I like the socks the guy was wearing, and, but just bullet points,
Right.
not prose, and something that enables people to pare the volume down.
I'm sure nobody will be judged by their colors of the socks.
Right.
Right,
Let's make that clear.
And in the end, we get something that looks like the level 1, the first 2 presentations of level 1 look like different ways of doing the same thing.
well, one is by category, one is by
Applicant.
applicant, right?
Right.
And I do think that, where we started is, what is the work product that you will want when you're making your final decision?
Well, I was actually going to get to a question that may come just before that question, if I may. So there's a meeting of the commission
Right.
eventually to discuss the first set of recommendations by the first team. And we do these however many times to get to all the recommendations. Conceivably, there will be an applicant that is, outstanding in the financial piece, say, but it's not the same applicant that's outstanding in another category. So the question now is, at this meeting, do we go back to the prior levels in order to get to the comparison?
If need be.
Go back to
It's
the
there.
aggregate findings.
I mean, we probably, but, and it's all there.
It's all there.
And that's part of the discussion.
Right.
To the extent we want it to be, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this can be re-aggregated in a variety of different
Oh, yeah.
ways, you know.
Yeah.
The thing that I think we're gonna care most about is criteria across applicants.
Yes.
That's the real issue. You know, looking at aggregated criteria by applicant, I mean, maybe there'll be a reason for it, I'm not sure, but that doesn't do much for you.
No, it doesn't. You need to be able to do it across applicants so you can make a judgment.
Right.
Right.
Whether it's individual criteria or the summary.
Or the subcategories. There's categories and there's subcategories, and then there's questions.
Right.
And I think there may be through 4 applicants, and in one subcategory, each of them has an outstanding and a completely different question.
Right.
But you're still gonna have to compare across that subcategory.
But the system also has to work so that's not necessarily just looking at aggregated scores across applicants. If we find ourselves in a situation where we have one applicant. So it's why we came up with sufficient, insufficient, as opposed to good, better, best, where it's a little bit too comparative. As we're allowed to license up to one, we want the information to be descriptive, and we're not just going to take you because
You're the only
we're
one.
looking at you and you're all insufficient, but you're the only application. Okay. So just being mindful of keeping the scores between the applicants, or the score of an applicant, somewhat separated from the aggregate score. I don't know how you do that, but.
I have a question for you. Do we, on the scoring or the ranking, we've got insufficient, sufficient, very good, and outstanding, and excellent. And the basis of that was a narrative that Commissioner Stebbins prepared some time ago. And
Did we see that? Did you distribute that?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
I shared it with Commissioner McHugh and got some thoughts and feedback from him, and then passed it along to
Okay. I thought I
Executive
might have
Director
forgotten it.
Day.
Thank you for that question. I thought I was missing that.
Well, and I think insufficient, you know, we had, when I was talking with Rick the other day about scoring and ranking, which you've had a lot more discussion about it than certainly I have, and you probably thought about it a whole lot longer. I wasn't sure, or I don't think we were entirely sure, what we were scoring or ranking. And the degree to which you, as the commission, or you individually as commissioners, would want to retain the ability to make that final decision,
Which final decision?
to rank and score.
We want to retain that
Yes.
to the total
Yes,
extent
yes,
possible.
and I
Yeah.
understand that you do,
Right.
you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that a-
So you're gonna, so I guess what I'm asking is you're gonna, you're going to receive the assessments of the reviewers and the evaluation teams where we have used a ranking where outstanding and excellent, and I'd like to read this to you if I may.
Okay.
Says provides information and responses to the question and overall application that is of uniformly high quality, demonstrates experience, creative thinking, and a unique approach. Insufficient is the other end, where there's just not enough information to
So that,
assess what
you
they've
just
given.
read you just read the description for outstanding?
Excellent, yeah,
Well,
outstanding.
you said excellent, but there is no excellent.
The way,
Outstanding.
yeah, it was outstanding.
Okay.
Um,
So there's 4 of them that would
Yeah.
have language more or
Yeah.
less like that.
Yeah,
That's fine.
okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah. And my suggestion would be that we use the word rating.
Okay,
We may or may not be ranking these,
Yeah.
but we certainly are rating them, and I think that's as unprejudicial a word as we can come up with. So I would call, so the quality of submission would become rating,
okay,
and we would rate this outstanding, very good, sufficient, or insufficient, and then we would explain
That makes
why we
sense.
came up with that rating.
But we understand, though, that we're going to be looking at things comparatively.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
We're in coming up with that rating.
That's really gonna be
We have,
us.
yeah,
Right.
the team members have the benefit of having seen side by side the different proposals, because that's fundamentally how
Yeah,
decisions get made.
Yeah.
which means that when you aggregate this all the way up and you fill in this last one that's a summary of everything that's down below, you may find one that's got more outstandings than others. But in our discussion, we reached the conclusion that the financial stability factor is so far and away better than everybody else's.
Right.
That the
Correct.
Commonwealth will be best served in that, even though it's a little
Right.
less good in other categories. So,
I agree, this is an interesting point, and this is almost something I was thinking with Catherine to think about. We don't want to inadvertently set up a process that suggests an appeal to the outcome that was unintended, for precisely the reason. We want to somehow make it absolutely clear that no matter what this says, when it comes to this body, we are unconstrained, within the limits of, the absence of fraud and reasonable whatever, we are unconstrained in our ability to figure out what those ratings actually in the end mean,
Right.
and ultimately pick a licensee.
Right.
So I just, it's worth thinking through to make sure we don't inadvertently somehow or other set something up that comes back to bite us.
I may have missed something, but which has happened occasionally. But the,
Welcome to the crowd.
yeah, what I was, as I was following through, I was trying to come up with what's the product that the commissioners, how far do the evaluation teams, how far should they go, and what product would the commissioners be looking for? And I'm not sure that I've found that spot necessarily, and it seems like the reviewer's summary, the first sheet, I mean, that seems pretty clear. It provides that basis, that foundation for the teams to get together and work. The second sheet, it sounds like basically is a process then where collate to bring those various rankings together in some comparison format.
you know, the second sheet is I don't know, it's a poltergeist.
Okay.
The second sheet is the individual reviewer's summary.
All right,
Put
okay.
Put it up,
And then
it's this one, only
Right.
reorganized.
and then it's reused again as the
That's right.
team's
As
summary.
the team's
Is that,
summary.
is that correct?
Right.
And that,
And
is
then
that,
and then the last one is 1/5 of what was referred to as level 1 category summary. So put level 1 up here on the screen.
No.
Yeah.
There you go.
Each group, general, financial, et cetera, will do an aggregation that we have, it's gonna be, just like this, right. We will rate each of the applicants by their totality will be outstanding, sufficient, insufficient, whatever.
Right.
So it'll be this page, but just one of the columns for each task force.
for each team?
And
And that's what will then come to the commission.
And there's two sheets that look
For this.
fairly similar behind it, and then deep in the files are the reviewer summaries.
Right.
Right.
And so the commission can ultimately be presented with this all filled out by each of the teams, so that the commission is looking at a color-coded thing that tells it. And that's the basis for the commission's discussion.
There actually would be this literal page would be the final thing that
Right.
would come to us.
Right.
But behind that would be
That's right.
the other series of
correct.
breakouts, right?
I think that's part of my question is, does the commission want the teams to go that far?
Right.
Or is that part of the process that the commissioners would actually do themselves, based on the comparisons from the teams? It's just,
So what you're asking is, do we want the task forces to do an aggregated final rating of
Yes.
each?
yes,
Or do you want to just leave it at a category and
with the
subcategory?
report out, do you want,
Right.
would the teams report out in that fashion?
Right.
The commissioners would pick it up from there.
Go ahead.
Well, I would probably err on the side of leaving it at the multiple, not making one final, one aggregating assessment, maybe leaving the however granular ratings, we call them ratings, right?
Ratings, yeah.
Because I'm wondering or thinking about this scenario in which if we did that, we could end up with one team having 2 outstanding applicants, correct? Overall outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you could have 4.
We can have all 4
Mhm.
be
Right.
outstanding.
Right.
Because you aggregate 4 outstandings here and somehow it all,
Right.
there's not a formula, but, you know,
Right.
the team decides, can only decide on an outstanding, and it's also an outstanding here.
Right.
And by necessity, we all have to go back to those levels in that scenario. So it occurs to me that it may be better to have that discussion at a commission meeting at the level of those multiple.
Here's my concern about that. I'm just taking building and site design, which I've got. That's got 47 or 48 questions in it. And to have the commission, unless it's really necessary, compare 47 different responses by 4 applicants is going to be a discussion from, you fill in the blanks. Rather than, again, for the same reason,
No, you're right.
seeing where the points of disagreement are, and because we have a summary in front of us, and seeing how deep we need to go into each category to figure out how to unpack it. It seems to me that's the only realistic way to have a conversation.
I would agree with that.
That's a fair concern.
Yeah, I would agree with, the only thing, my only concern would be the issue I raised before, so which is, do we run any risk of creating some kind of a paper trail that causes a problem? If that is not an issue, then I agree completely with Jim, that we should come up to this level. If we get 4 outstandings, we get 4 outstandings. We figure, and it's our judgment as to which is the most outstanding. You know, I think that's okay, as long as the other problem doesn't exist.
Well, the commission would see the rating, and they would also see the statement of findings behind the rating.
Way back behind,
which-
right. Oh, no, there would be the
Okay.
task force
Consensus.
assessment, yes.
Consensus
Right.
statement.
That would be part of the report
That'd be the
out.
consensus, so that might make some distinctions among
Right.
the outstandings right there,
Right.
right, good point,
Plus, the commissioners would be able to
right,
to
good point,
discuss whether or not
right,
they concur with those statement of findings are actually at that level.
right.
So we've got the 4 steps.
Right.
We got 4 steps?
I have, I think I have 4 steps.
Okay.
I have reviewers are going to review the assigned questions and provide a rating to the applicant's response and the why they
Mhm.
rated it that way. I have
In bullet points.
yeah, in bullet points, all bullets, yeah. I have the individual team members will review the questions and also review the questions and compare the subcategories across applicants.
Yep.
Individual team members. The evaluation team is going to deliberate and make their own final findings and assessment of each applicant, which is the basis of the report to the commissioners.
And which will be
Well, it
in
can
the
also-
same form. And we'll-
Yeah, in the same
In the
form.
same form,
Same
right.
form, yeah.
And that was a, wherever possible, consensus.
Right.
And then lastly, the commissioners receive and consolidate the evaluation team's reports and select the winning proposal.
And in between the last one, the individual teams will also present an aggregated rating and
Yes, yes.
recommendation.
Yeah,
The subcategories and the category.
And the
Yeah,
category.
they'll be doing, yeah.
yeah. And so filling out that level 1 thing is almost, not almost, is a staff task from the consensus ratings that the commission, that the teams.
Yes,
So it's kind of this one,
yeah,
this one twice.
that one, yeah.
You can redraft these things
Oh,
and send
yes.
them around to us quickly, and
Yeah.
if we
Yeah,
don't.
that would be great.
We could include that.
Yeah, because we would like to be explaining this next Wednesday,
Right.
Right.
for sure. That would
So
make
we
a-
have to understand it first.
Yes, exactly.
And with that redraft, we can also include the definition of the rating.
Under the definition of the rating, I've got the hierarchy of the reviews, you know, in the reviewer, team member.
Yeah,
As I just said,
that's a-
went through
right.
the steps.
I have one question, and again, somewhat for Catherine as well as everybody else. Is there, these, let's see what I'm trying to say. The individuals will be contributing directly to a rating, which will be compiled into a aggregated rating, which will then come to the commission. And each of those individual persons' ratings will end up being a significant part of the decision-making process. We have a reg that says we can use experts and consultants, and that use of them doesn't create public meetings. But is there any line between an advisory role that would require public meetings and an advisory role that doesn't? I mean, is there any gray area here that we're need to be concerned about? I think particularly of my group, which is an idiosyncratic group.
The question came up under review of the open meeting law that I had looked at. Under the Attorney General's guidelines, what they suggest is that any official that puts together an advisory committee who's going to provide advice on something that individual official could otherwise decide on their own does not create an advisory committee, and then it's not subject to the open meeting law. I think in the situation we have here, what we have is a group of consultants and independent evaluators, which is covered by our regulations, and they are acting as a review and giving advice to the particular commissioner that heads that up, or a particular staff person if it's not a commissioner. So I don't see there being an open meeting law question.
Okay.
I think,
You've been concerned about the use of the word advisors
yes.
sometimes. So why is that a concern?
Well, because there is also language under the Attorney General's open meeting law guidelines that advisory committees they're bodies that are subject to the open meeting law. The distinction in their guidance is that if that advisory committee is advising an official who could otherwise make the decision on their own without their advice, it doesn't become a public body that's subject to the open meeting law. So I think in our situation, our regulations are clear as to the kinds of advice and counsel we can get in this process, and our regulations call them independent evaluators or consultants or professionals, and that's how we structure our review teams here.
And you've seen the correspondence that I've sent to people, and you know the way it's been positioned, and you're continue to be comfortable with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And with this process, in addition to that, we're not creating a subcommittee of the commission. It's because
That's correct.
Because that subcommittee would be subject to the open meeting law.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, we're just dividing up the work into 5 commissioners, and the 5 commissioners are
We're going to come back to report.
gonna come back to report.
Jennifer and Catherine, I have a meeting of my group, as you know, Friday morning. And in this, I don't know whether you'll have this restructured format or not. We can certainly talk it through, but it's a little bit of a different,
Yes.
horse of a different color, so to speak. So when we talk with the commission, first of all, I don't have any paid consultants. These are they're gonna get a stipend, but it's modest. And I don't want to all of a sudden have them start looking and say, holy cow, what am I doing here? But I think you appreciate that this different, so we'll have to ad lib a little bit at our meeting on Friday to
I think so.
adapt this for my group.
And I also think the nature of the applicant's response to that category is, could be so wildly different.
Right.
It's very hard to predict.
Yeah.
So I think to try to rigidly approach it like you would number of jobs
Finance,
created,
right,
or
yeah.
how how you're going to mitigate impacts on local businesses is very different.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so we will not approach that as quite so.
Right, okay. The meeting that we're having on the 11th, you were gonna see whether we could have it at least available telephonically and maybe stream it? Will it be streamed? Have we decided that yet?
We had, that I know of, and Janice is behind me, so I'm sure, but we had just had preliminary discussions about telephonic. I think, obviously, that would probably be possible. We don't know if it's possible for a webcast or stream.
So we still haven't figured that out yet?
Yes.
Okay. And Janice isn't here, I don't think. Okay,
They're way behind me.
okay.
11th?
The 11th, that's 11th, right?
Yes,
That's the
the 11th.
evaluation training session.
Correct. And there's a,
It's not an open meeting.
you can touch on the
Yeah,
draft
we can
agenda.
have it done.
There is a
No.
draft agenda
Is
in
it-
your packet as well, to just check.
That's a
in.
training
It's a
session.
training session.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I
But it
think it's
could
in
be,
this
it could be,
location.
it could be webcast if we wanted it to be.
Oh.
That's what we were talking about, because I've got a lot of people, and I didn't know about this meeting until late, so I'm not sure how many of them can come. All right, you want to run through the agenda?
Yes.
Sure. The welcome and introduction is by you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Then Rick is going to talk about who are the key staff and the evaluation team assignments, and the consulting professionals. We also want at this meeting to talk about how to deal with press and how to deal with confidentiality, so that team members, especially outside consultants or other experts, are going to behave and work in line with the entire Gaming Commission's expectations about the process, and keeping it both transparent but professional. Catherine is going to introduce the legal team, and then we'll get to really the talking about the review process, which we're working on a detailed agenda for. But essentially what we'd like to do is go over the schedule, explain why the schedule is the way it is, how we're going to take public input, and what the expectation is of the reviewers, particularly between the time they get the packages and before the commissioners' hearings in each of the host communities. We're going to talk about the framework for the review process, which is this architecture that I've talked about, and expectations for documentation.
That's what we've just been discussing.
Exactly, you know, and what a rating system is. Some of what we will present next week is still going to be in process, obviously. I don't think we're going to have, we have to work with, we're going to work with your IT people, because we want to figure out some mechanics of getting and storing information so that it's both secure and accessible to people who need it. And then talk about the roles for evaluation team members, which is just, as we went through, what is the expectation of the reviewers, as reviewers, as team members, the commissioners as team leaders, and then your role in making the process. We also would very much like to start to confirm some dates for the pre-application team meetings. We're intending, as we had put in our response to your RFR, to issue what we're calling the application review guide. And I think it'll be particularly helpful for outside consultants, but certainly for staff, which really lays out all of this information so they can consult it. And we're all starting off on the same foot, understanding how the process will work. So that is in process right now. That will include something that I just mentioned, for example, how to deal with press inquiries if you get them. It will include information, and again, particularly relevant to outside consultants. You know, if you want to promote your participation in this selection process, to please ask, seek the review of Elaine Driscoll before you do that. So some of it's record keeping, it's just a set of rules so that we all abide by the same process. But the real heart of the matter is the application review process and describing what it will look like. And I think taking questions and hopefully getting some suggestions at this meeting, because I know for HLT has a lot of experience, and I really look forward to talking with them and seeing what they've learned.
On that note, I know that at least 2 of their principals could not make September 11. Do we know if others from their team members
We were advised that they thought at least one of them would be able to make it.
would be able to make it?
I think Lyle Hall might be
Lyle.
able to, but Robert Scarpetti can't.
Just that one, that
Yeah.
1 week.
That sounds fine. You want
So
to
that's the agenda.
look at the schedule then quickly? That was the front page here.
Yep, and then the schedule. Which I will, it's very hard to read up there.
Well, we
You got
have,
it here.
we have,
Fortunately, you have it here. The room will just have to trust us when we say what it says. Obviously, we started with the team trainings on 9/11, and we're scheduling formal pre-application team meetings right now between 9:23 and 10:04. I think we'll have some working meetings with the technical experts ahead of time, so that we are as well prepared. And we have thoughts on how to really think about, thoughts on each of these questions. The applications are due on the 4th. Talking with Mr. Lacosta, the administrative review, we expect to be complete on October 11th. There'll be 6 days, 6 working days, 5 to 6 working days. Applicants will have 7 days to cure material defects. And if the information went to them as late as the 11th, they would have until Friday the 18th to supply that information back. Curing non-material defects, they have 14 days, and we're assuming that would be done. I'm sorry, there's a mistake in this line item here. This should go out another week to the 25th, line 6. In discussion with staff, we are showing here that the applications would be released, in other words, available for the public to review on the 11th if there were material defects that had to be cured. And I believe that,
if there were not.
No, we're not.
I'm sorry, if there were non-material defects that were to be, exactly. I do think we have a question about whether, if one had material defects, would you let the other 3 out all at this, before the 4th? Let's say there were 4. I think that's a question that we need to answer this month.
Let's see, and I understood the plan from administrative completeness standpoint was to deal with the applications, of course, simultaneously, identify, as we were identifying anything was missing, to notify the applicants and move forward. But the goal would be, as we got them, as we determined they were administratively complete, to move those particular sections to the evaluation team so they could begin work. We would not wait until
Right.
they were all complete, but as they were deemed administratively complete, unless the commission has a different thought on it.
Well, so there's a period of cure of material defects?
Yeah.
And that's a 7-day.
That's the 7 days.
So the question really applies only to the period of time between the cure and the earliest release of the others and the cure of the materially
Deficient.
deficient.
That's right.
That's right, because if they don't cure it, that's it.
They're out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, it seems right to me, as a presumption, that we would do it the way you're saying. I think we don't have to decide that
Right, we don't
cast
have
in
to
stone
decide
until
right
the
now.
last minute, and it
No.
may turn out we decided we couldn't release some of the
Right.
background checks because there were things that were being debated and so forth, so, but presumptively, I think we do it the way you're talking about.
I think it's best to get it out there as soon as possible, because we do want to have public comment in time for some hearings later on. And I think the more it's available, the better, and this could be a lot of information.
Well, it is conceivable that the material defect may be in only one section, say,
Correct.
of the, and the other 4
Right?
could easily be
And if somebody doesn't cure,
releasable.
people may have wasted their time looking at something, but
Yeah.
hopefully not very much, because it's really 7 days you've got. We are showing the review commencing on the October 4th.
Jennifer, on that, by that you mean
The
to
technical
include
reviewers.
the technical,
Yeah, so they'll get it, they'll
what-
get familiar with it.
the administrative review, or
Mhm.
the teams already start reviewing from day one, even though there may be some administrative
Well,
review and some
there's-
cure to be done.
You see on the 7th and 8th, you already have scheduled the applicant presentations, which are 90 minutes for each of the applicants to present their ideas, their plans, their visions for their slot parlors. I think having this in the hand of the reviewers a couple days before, just to get familiar with what has been submitted, so that when they see the presentations, they'll just have a sense of, well, where am I gonna focus my interest on, will be useful. I don't expect a lot's gonna happen. It's the, applications are due on a Friday, the 4th. I know there will be people who can, go right to them and just see how big they are,
Well,
I
then,
think our
but-
goal is to get those applications processed in that first week, and I think that was the goal we had on the timelines.
And I guess there's no inconsistency with having the presentations even while we're doing the administratively complete review.
And there might be some positives, actually, because
Surface
commissions
something.
aren't, commissioners, you're not burdened down trying to sort through applications or mess around with that. You're focusing on what they've decided
big
is
picture,
important
yeah.
for their
Right.
introductory review.
Right.
I'm just coming from, when we do procurements, we do the phase 1 review, which is the administrative parallel here. And until it's been done and cured, it's released to the review teams. Which I know, on the other end, we're trying to achieve the goals that you articulate, as well as be expeditious with a very short time frame
Right.
and a lot of information.
I think it's to our advantage.
Schedule availability was also a practical issue.
Yes.
When I do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Details.
The next 3 lines, 10, 11, and 12, were also on the master schedule for, that I got from the Chief of Staff, and that's October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. And we understand these meetings are meetings in the community for public input. They're not your meetings, but we will be attending and we'll be taking good notes so that we can make sure that the open issues and the questions that may need to be answered are captured at those meetings. Because on the October 12th, you'll see that we are saying that that is when any outside agency and/or reviewers must submit their information requests.
November
If we-
12th, yeah, sorry.
if there's additional information that a reviewer needs just to understand something, or thinks a page is missing, or wants some clarification, we are going to get all that, and we're going to provide it to you prior to your, the commission meetings in the host communities. And those are scheduled now for November 21st, 22nd, 25th, and 26th. We have, and those are on the calendar. Mid-review team meetings are between the 27th and the 5th. We're discussing, I think, closing public comment on the 3rd of December, which
And
would be,
I might add, that of course is up to the commission
Yes.
whether to select when that date would be, but the idea would be making sure all the answers, if the applicants were answering some of the questions that you posed at the host community, maybe there's public comment, that all that be submitted before the hearing was closed. And
Right.
at that time, that would put at least a stop on that kind of.
I have a question. Is there a reason why these team meetings cannot occur earlier? I mean, I guess I always assumed that there would be a number of them.
Yeah.
And a good way to parcel them may just be everybody review the first, 3 questions, because those are
Right.
straightforward, and we can come to a meeting and regroup at a later time.
I think Jennifer was targeting at least a minimum,
Right.
but at least I've always assumed that the commissioners, as chairs, will be calling their teams as you deem appropriate.
Yeah, I think there'll be plenty more of this, and we may very well work out and should work out with each commissioner a schedule where we put these official meetings in, or formal team meetings. There may be many informal ones, but I do think we're going to need to convene a time, take the economic development. Let's tackle the job creation subcategory on Thursday, and next Monday, we're gonna tackle the workforce development category. So I think we can replicate this for each category so that we can schedule meetings. The reason this is shown, I think this becomes a very critical time between after the post-community meetings and the meetings where you consider the reports. And it's actually not that long either, so.
And it's right after Thanksgiving.
And it's right after Thanksgiving. So we do need to have a big calendar of meetings scheduled, I would say by the end of September, for all of October, November, and December with each of you and with the reviewers. And then if we have some informal ones, fine. So we want to cut off public comment by a certain date, which Rick and I think put in the 3rd. We can give the applicants only so much time if we've asked for a little bit more information. We've also cut that off on the 3rd, when the hearings will officially close on each applicant. More team meetings. Draft reports, I think, are due on the 9th. This would be the draft report that each evaluation team is going to send up to the commission. We have the final report on the 13th, with team meetings in between. And I think this is really gonna vary by question, by category, and by team. Yours may look very different. But the critical next date really is that the meetings where the commissioners consider the report, which is currently on the master schedule is 12/5. But in discussions with Mr. Day, we thought the December 13th is far more realistic. And then the license is awarded on the 27th. What this assumes in this calendar is that there are no surrounding communities or impacted live entertainment venue disputes, if you will, which, if you map those out, take you into mid-January for awarding of a license.
I don't know whether this really matters, but I don't know, is it realistic to issue the reports 2 days after Christmas? We've been generalizing the end of the month, but maybe we need now to hone in on what day we would actually do it. What?
On the awarding the license, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
What day is, we know what day of the month the 27th is?
it's Friday,
It's a Friday, so
Yeah.
Christmas is Wednesday.
yeah.
Yes, and that was a legal determination on being an issue of the final decision, wasn't it? Because we were originally gonna do 12/17, but that didn't provide enough time for.
Yeah, when we filled in all of the periods that we needed in between, you come out to about 12/27.
Yeah, I'm
So
just
it
not,
can be
That doesn't
later.
mean it can't be moved.
yeah, well, yeah. We could think about that. Maybe it's gotta be, 1/3 or something, or 12/24 or 20, so I don't know, but might as well not continue to reiterate a date, which is really not realistic.
But as a, we should consider it for, but, commission considers report on 12/13. What's that gonna be?
That's reports plural from
That-
all the. all
Yeah,
the
that was
task
intended to be
forces.
the report out by the evaluation teams.
Right.
5.
And so then is it contemplated that on the 12/27, the commission would meet again and then make the final decision or, and license award, or that would be done on the 13th and the statement of reasons and the formal award would come on the 27th? The findings and the formal award.
Come on the 27th, I think was the
So
contemplation.
during those 2 weeks, we would be deliberating.
Yeah, that was
Deciding.
the idea that the 13th
can't
would be the.
We have to deliberate in public.
No, I meant deliberate. I meant, we'll be talking about it.
You would have additional meetings during that timeframe?
Okay.
All,
Yeah.
as long as it takes us to
All
make
right.
the
No,
decision.
I
yeah.
understand.
Right, and then as soon as we're done, then it's gotta get written up.
Okay.
And
So-
whatever the theoretical endpoint is the
I got it,
27th.
I got it.
If it's really only the announcement being written up, then the commissioners can be away and the staff can do it on the 27th.
Maybe thinking about vacation.
Good luck.
Yeah, that's the point I was trying to
I
get
got
at.
that right.
We've been making sure that was reserved to the commissioners.
Right. All right, I think we've made a lot of progress, and, you know, somebody had to take a first draft at this,
great.
at this process.
Good.
And I think with your draft and then our iterations, we've sort of broken the back of this thing. And,
This is great, I appreciate we couldn't do it without your
Yeah, good,
collective thoughts.
great. Thank you all. Anybody else, questions, anybody?
No, it just occurred to me as we looked at awarding the license, something to maybe contemplate and figure back into the process is discussion or debate where we factor that in terms of license conditions. Maybe that comes out of the score sheet, maybe it comes out of the notes of the aggregate scoring, but kind of factoring in,
Right.
since that's going to be probably a pretty formal piece of the final license award. I mean, there may be some standard stipulations of you agree to abide by everything in your application. Obviously, some will probably be a little more particular.
Yeah, I overlay in my mind this schedule with the adjudicatory hearings and meetings that we will have on the category ones.
Right.
And that's gonna be a busy next 3 months,
Yes.
so thanks for
Very
your
busy.
help. in this.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
I just need to take a real short break, and we'll come right back. All right, so we are reconvening about 3 o'clock of public meeting number 76, and we are introducing our Director of Workforce, Supplier, and Diversity Development.
Good afternoon, Chairman Crosby and members of the commission. I'm here as your newly hired Director of Workforce, Supplier, and Diversity Development to get your input on a proposed vendor and supplier task force as requested by Chairman Crosby at the last commission meeting. So the Mass Gaming Commission, next slide, is charged by the Expanded Gaming Act with creating regulations that establish vendor and supplier business and employee credentials for licensing. And the commission is also charged with reviewing gaming license applications to evaluate potential licensees' proactive approach to demonstrate their support and focus on small business in the Commonwealth. You know, as we saw before with the evaluation or the rating criteria. And the Mass Gaming Commission will work to implement the Act's intent to provide the greatest possible economic benefits and revenues to the people of the Commonwealth. Next slide. The statute repeatedly encourages the use of Massachusetts vendors and suppliers, including local minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. And so in order to meet the priorities of the statute, the Mass Gaming Commission staff is proactively planning to create and coordinate a task force to ensure that Massachusetts small business vendors become capable and qualified suppliers. The small businesses become capable and qualified vendors and suppliers to serve as potential gaming licensees. So the proposed task force will coordinate existing programs, next slide, draw resources to local communities and businesses, and provide information to applicants to ensure maximum impact on small businesses. So this diagram that you have in front of you and in your slides demonstrates how this proposed vendor and supplier task force would work with local partners and also directly with casino applicants. So to give you an example, local partners are working directly with casino applicants to provide information about businesses, and oftentimes there are host community agreements that have targeted local businesses and suppliers that they need to work with. However, there may be a need for this vendor and supplier task force, which is composed mostly of statewide agencies, representatives from statewide agencies and organizations, to provide backup support. Should there not be, for example, specific company resources in the local communities. For example, we heard about the scallops that are predominant in New Bedford. There may be green technology companies in other parts of the state and not in a particular locality. So next slide. The vendor and supplier task force will focus on 3 categories: business identification, technical assistance, and financing assistance. And we believe that these resources and collaborative partnerships may make just the difference between growing local business and missing out on an opportunity to provide a product and service to a large anchor business like a casino. And we acknowledge that casino license applicants may have vendor support programs, and we welcome the chance to partner closely with them to identify potential vendors who might need financing or technical support to compete for some of the key contracts. We imagine that local partners, such as municipalities, banks, and community development corporations, will also be involved at a certain point and be able to provide necessary financing to help small businesses position themselves to serve a large anchor business like a resort destination casino. Next slide. So this proposed list, although not exhaustive, includes individuals and organizations, a group of stakeholders that was assembled last fall by Chairman Crosby and Commissioner Stebbins. And it's composed mainly of representatives of state agencies or statewide business groups. So we imagine that the task force will be focused on providing statewide resources to vendors and suppliers and information to applicants. We also, I'm interested in hearing from you or from others if there are organizations that we may have missed or may be interested in helping the applicants meet the requirements of the statute. Next slide. So we talked a little bit about the local partners. Once casino and slot parlor licenses have been awarded, the task force could engage with these local partners to foster programs and promote services and help area businesses and potential suppliers. So, next slide. So, we have tentatively suggested that the first meeting could be as early as September 12th. And we have tentatively booked on a few of your calendars, so. Any questions?
Just,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just a quick note. Some of the, just to add to some of those task force members, some of the folks that prior to your coming on board made presentations to us about the resources. And you were kind enough to share this list with me, and I'm sorry I didn't find these folks missing before, but our State Department of Agriculture, the representative from Economic Affairs, who's responsible for helping to manage the creative economy industry sector.
It's Helena Fruscia. Right, I had the same thought.
And unless I'm missing a Mass Department of Energy Resources that also made a presentation to us in the Mass Clean Energy Center.
Okay.
Like you said, it wasn't an exhaustive, completely inclusive list.
Okay, great. I'd be glad to add those folks.
I have a number of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Just curious about your, a couple of items relative to your thought process on this task force. How large, how often do you envision it? How often do you think it would meet? For what period of time? Or maybe that's something that after you have some of these conversations, you can come back and give us an update. But I'm just generally curious as to what may be your thought.
You know, I think that will be a point of discussion for the group, but I imagine that before the, I think until the licenses are awarded, we may meet a couple of times, but I think there will be a need to break down into some of these subcommittees. So business identification, I imagine, would meet more regularly up until, the applicants are finalized, and I think it will be those subcommittees that meet more regularly, and those would be much smaller. The group appears quite large, but I think when we break it down into those 3 different areas, it will be much more manageable. So.
Yeah, because what you suggest, some of these task forces are usually, they have to be managed. They have to be reminded of the next meeting, and they have to be given material to be effective to come to the meeting. So I know that there's a resource question related to
Right,
that.
that's true.
I'm also curious as to what you identify here conceptually as the local partners.
Mm-hmm.
From this slide, the one where apparently each region has, and I suspect that they have been in discussions with their locality first and foremost. But it would appear that there may be businesses that could cut across different regions, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly true on the slots parlor license, say,
Right.
which may end up, frankly, being in either region A or B for one. So I'm sure it's a representation, but it's not intended to be siloed. Is that a fair statement?
No, that's very true. And I think the interest in having a statewide entity that looked at some of these relationships or opportunities that might not arise in a particular region or a particular locality, we thought would be very helpful. And so, for example, you know, the Clean Energy Center and the Department of Energy, we've been having, Commissioner Stebbins and I have had several conversations with them, and they're interested in potentially putting together regional supplier fairs that focus on clean energy technology. Now, that's an area where every locality may not have all the companies represented, maybe not even in their region. So looking at what types of businesses are there for business identification purposes, and then maybe pulling from other parts of the state. But I think the bottom line is we want to make sure that Massachusetts companies are the ones selected for these opportunities or considered first. And that the applicant doesn't first look outside of Massachusetts to our neighboring states.
And on that note, it occurs to me that the most critical discipline to be thinking about now may be the trades, or you know, the construction companies and the subcontractors to, or even designers, say, that may be able to provide service to the, you know, design and construction of the casino, not necessarily for the operations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, and we have several meetings coming up in actually next week, I think, with various affinity groups for different construction organizations. So I think you're right, and I think also outreach to the applicants regarding and providing information from the Office of Supplier Diversity and other entities will be critical.
Right.
You know, that was something I mentioned at our, whenever it was, last meeting sometime, when you were, that was the need to get this out to folks, and to make yourself available to the applicants during this very intense next 4-month period when they're putting their proposals together and giving them all the resources they can. You referred a couple of times to the meeting that Commissioner Stebbins and I had a while back. That was a kind of a random selection of folks who we thought might contribute to our ability to make diversity in the workforce and the supplier base a reality. It wasn't just supplier, it was workforce and supplier, and it was a focus on diversity, not just generally. So this is not, and maybe this is where you and I got off track on the two different groups. You know, this is focused on the suppliers,
Right.
and it includes diversity, but it's not, it's meant to be a diverse effort, but it's focused on local suppliers. So I don't know whether are you planning on having another group, or has that group morphed to this group, or?
Well, I think this will be an important task force. I do want to talk to you. I think tomorrow morning we're scheduled to talk more, because I think it might be a good idea to have another meeting just focused on diversity. I'm not sure if that will be a task force, but I welcome the opportunity to talk with you further about that. So I think it's important that we infuse diversity into this conversation.
Absolutely.
I think we also may be prudent to have another focused conversation on workforce. And also, of course, diversity should be infused into that conversation as well. So I think that some of the members that maybe aren't represented in this group, I had planned potentially on inviting them to the workforce conversation.
Okay. All right, so we can follow up on that. And Commissioner Stebbins, if you wanted to get together with us tomorrow, I don't know if you're here, you'd be more than welcome, obviously. At what time, you know what time it is offhand?
9:30.
9:30, okay. So we better adjourn this pretty soon. What else was I gonna say about this? I've forgotten.
I I have a couple of other questions. One, this may not be necessarily an area of focus for the task force, but I think it really should be a focus for us, the commission as an organization, and that's relative to measuring the outcomes
Right, good. That's
of,
what I forgot.
of these three key pieces. It's great that there will be business identification and assistance, you know, some of it may end up being successful in terms of providing a service to the casinos, but some of it may not, which is still a benefit. So I see two measures, at least here. What business may be benefiting from these efforts, and that of the collective agencies, the collective efforts of other agencies, but also what is actually a successful outcome out of this effort, because somebody ended up being a successful bidder or got a number of purchase orders or whatever may be the case from our applicants or licensees.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's something I was gonna say and I forgot. This is one of the reasons that's unfortunate our performance management process got hung up, because this is exactly one of the places where we want to have measurements of how we're doing. And you know, a very important topic, whenever you have this meeting, I don't know if you can get it together by the 12th, but whenever you have this meeting, as you well know, it's very easy to have these just be blah, blah, blah sessions and
Right.
not very much happens. But what we really want to say to knowledgeable people is, how the hell do you make this work well? How can you take this from being just another bunch of type saying good things to programs that really have bite and really have teeth and really have effectiveness? What are the best practices? What should we forget about? What's bunk? Let's forget the bunk and let's do stuff that really works. How do we measure success? So if you can, rather than everybody just talking about all their multitude of programs, if you can really hone in on how do we do this in a way that makes it distinctive. We want to have the most successful program in terms of local and diverse workforce and supplier base that's ever been done in this business at all. How do we do that? That's your job. And how do you get these people to give you and us the tools to do that?
Great.
I still have a few others. If that's okay. But I agree with the chairman that we need to adjourn soon. I'm interested, and perhaps this is a subject of the next follow-up discussion. But I'm interested into what the financial assistance may mean. And I know you alluded to it with there's local banks and they could offer any number of or they probably already offer financial support.
Well, I think number one, what we want to do is look at the existing programs. For example, the Mass Growth Capital Corporation, Mass Development. I mean, these programs already offer financing to small business in the Commonwealth. And there are others, right? So let's look at the existing programs. And one potential discussion that I see is this what we have to work with, or could there be others? Could we tailor specific programs for potential vendors for the casinos? I mean, it's possible. So that's what I'd like to see, is first assess what we're working with in terms of statewide programs, and see if we could come up with something specific.
I think it extends beyond that too, or as Jill pointed out, getting an inventory of what already exists from the folks that we want to involve, as well as see if they'll be a little creative. But again, it's to help that vendor who needs some capacity building, and it may need more equipment, it may need more working capital or a line of credit to be able to step up and be a qualified vendor. So
Right,
that's
but
the financing piece falls into that.
right, there would appear to be a catch-22 often, which is, as a banker, I may be reluctant to lend to somebody who doesn't yet have the purchase order, but it's actually the capital that would make him available to respond to a purchase order. So how is that triangulation, if you will? What gives, say, the banker comfort that providing a loan to these small business, say, is going to result in filling out a big purchase order because they're a local vendor that a casino may want?
Right, and I think there are some best practices locally that we could look at. I'm probably not prepared to highlight them in detail today.
That's fine.
But I think there are best practices, and that a bank or a financer may be more comfortable knowing that they have potentially this piece of business from a casino. All they need is a little financing. So.
Right. Well, I was going to suggest, and I'll talk to you offline about this more, but the State Treasurer's Office has a small banking partnership, which may be a model that we may want to emulate, or maybe we may want to think about emulating. Effectively, they say, we'll invest in your bank, small bank, if you do, in turn, turn around and offer loans to small business. So we'll, anyway, it's a model that we may want to look at.
Okay,
And
great.
I could facilitate those discussions.
Oh, that would be great. And perhaps we'll invite them to our
There
task
could be
force.
other members, attendees of the task force as well, I'm sure.
Great. Associated Industries of Massachusetts, that may be too big. They may not be, quote, small, but I don't know, there's somebody to think about, including,
I think they're on our list, and actually, I think I checked my BlackBerry, and they have just accepted.
AIM? Oh, okay, they're not on, they're on this, I'm sorry. Forget it. And Commissioner Stebbins mentioned the Creative Economy Group at the Department of Economic Development. Aren't there regional development agencies?
RPA?
No, besides the RPAs, isn't there something else? Regional,
There are a number of regional economic development
regional
groups. I think when you look at Jill's diagram, I would fit those folks
in the local
into
groups?
the local partners.
Okay, fine, okay. If you're gonna try to do this the 12th, unless you've already invited, I guess you haven't invited people, you better get the letters out tomorrow,
So, before the Labor Day holiday, as a new staff person, I was toiling away, sending out emails. So, so I have sent at least initial save the dates to
Oh, good,
many of the folks.
okay, great. Anything else?
No, it looks great.
Great effort.
Yeah.
Looks great,
Good.
looks great.
Great.
It's a great start, be a very important contribution to the people we're trying to serve.
Well, I look forward to keeping you updated continuously.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna, I have something at 4:15, which I would like to go to if it isn't gonna get in the way of serious business. So I'm thinking about maybe, we wanna have the meeting, we wanna finish the conversation about Friday's
Right.
plan. And then I might leave and let you handle these last two topics, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
So Friday's meeting is going to be a continuation of the Plain Ridge, Penn National conversation.
it'll be a continuation of this meeting, too.
That's right.
Yeah.
And, but there needs to be a supplementary posting so that everybody is aware of what we're going to do. We had talked about the possibility, hinted at, I suppose, the possibility of an adjudicatory hearing to resolve the, do we approve the transfer of the deal issue? Adjudicatory hearings give us a concrete record and appellate rights that are governed by the Administrative Procedure Act rather than just a new lawsuit. That has a number of advantages for all participants in it. But it is most useful when there are contested issues of fact, because in the process of an adjudicatory hearing, we find the facts, we have a record that supports our findings and all. There aren't any real facts in dispute in the discussion that we heard this morning. It's a question of undisputed facts. We have the document, we have the assignments, we have the approvals. The question is, how does that comport with the statute? It's really a exercise of our discretion, an application of law and discretion to undisputed facts. That being the case, a hearing of the type we typically have, non-adjudicatory, would allow us to make a policy decision, record the policy decision and move on, and have the legal challenges confined to the area of basically reviewing the record on which we made our decisions. It would approximate the kind of review we'd get if we had, if there is an appeal to a court, and if we had had the administrative, the adjudicatory hearing. General Counsel Blue and I have talked about that, and I think I'm accurately reflecting your views that that would be the preferable way to go. We don't have to designate parties in interest. We don't have to give specific notice as to with the formality that we would in an adjudicatory hearing, which would be difficult to do between now and Friday anyway, and we achieve approximately the same result in terms of having a court apply as it would the law to our discretionary exercise of power. So I'd recommend that we think about a public hearing, not an adjudicatory hearing, as the posting we make for Friday with sign-up sheets and other kinds of things.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner McHugh. I mean, we do have a situation here where the facts are not in dispute. What the commission is being asked to do is apply its enabling act to the facts that are in this case, so it is totally its discretion as to how it does that. So I think that, you know, any challenge to the action that the commission takes will be limited to the record that we create on Fridays, and today and Friday as part of those public hearings. So it would be best for us to be able to then put an amended notice out that says it is a public hearing. We could advise people of how many minutes they had per person to speak. We could have a sign-up sheet, let anyone who wants to provide input, and then at the end of that process, the commission can review and they can make a decision and we can move it forward.
I'm fine with that. I defer to your collective judgments on this. If that's what you think it makes sense, I'm fine with that. So, yeah, I think the only other priority from my standpoint is to make sure that we, and I think we have, but could continue to make it clear that we're inviting people to give us their opinions one way or the other on this, so that we do have a chance to find out whether there's any articulate opposition that we want to take into consideration. As long as we do that, and if we had a sign-up sheet and we had 80 people that wanted to talk, I don't know that we would want to do that, but maybe we cross that bridge when we get to it. We probably won't have that. So maybe we ought to encourage comments to the website in whenever we post. We ought to encourage comments to the website and representation of groups to speak. Like if there's an organized opposition group, we get a representation of that group. We don't get every member of the group, or something like that. But anyway, as long as we get that out there, I'm fine with that, and we can. I think we've already found we can schedule it here, right? At what did we say? 1 o'clock. 1:30. 1:30. Okay. Is there anything else that we need? Is there? I guess we should probably, just for the sake of discussion, we should probably maybe hold open the Boston Wind conversation too. We don't know what'll be happening. Hopefully we'll have a decision by then. We don't really know what's gonna happen, but should we put on there just for the record that topic is possibly on the agenda as well?
We certainly could put in review of the update report on Wind Boston
Yes.
discussion.
And you had a couple of, sorry.
Without promising any results or
Right.
action.
Just a quick update from John.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, as a matter of fact, a continuation of the Ombudsman's report would probably be appropriate with all three of the issues. And I'm advised that we've had, staff have been briefing and exchanging information on pre-application meetings with potential applicants.
Okay.
Or with potential licensees.
Well,
And there may be some policy questions that feel the need to run by the commission and just check in on interpretation for those as well, if time permits tomorrow, or Friday.
Fine, so maybe we put a little bit broader ombudsman. Is there anything else that we need to put into this? Didn't you had some, who was it? You had some other things, John Whitten?
I mentioned the pre-application meeting.
Okay, so same topic, okay.
Is it fair that we can ask or stipulate that people's public comments be addressed to the topic and not the general opposition or viewpoints on anything else related to the proposed casino? or
No,
Slots
we
Park?
definitely can do that. I think it would make sense to ask them to address specifically the issue of the transfer between Penn National and Our Way. Also to ask specifically that if there is an organization, that one member speak on behalf of each organization, not each member, that they're limited to potentially 5 minutes per
Yeah.
person, that they need to sign up in advance the day of. So all of that, I think if we could do maybe a blog posting or something on our website to get that out there, that would be great.
Great.
I think that's great.
Does that cover it?
Yeah, it was-
This last topic, I do have some things about this that I was gonna like to talk to Todd about, but I can do it, yeah, the key policy questions. I have a couple notes, but I can talk to Todd about that tomorrow. All right.
Well, do you think we ought to do that now, or do you think we ought to hold that till Friday so that we don't do something that's undone tomorrow?
That's undone, that I had to undo tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it.
There, from our perspective, we could hold those policy questions off tomorrow.
Yeah.
It might be prudent, though, if we could deal with the small business impact statement.
Yeah, no, we'll do
just
that.
as we're-
Yeah.
Okay. that's
We
fine.
actually
I think it'd
currently
be
have
better to
that.
have a
Okay.
good, open discussion
Okay.
of those policies.
All right, fine, thank you. I apologize for dashing. But I'd like to do that. So the chair passes the chair to Commissioner McHugh.
Okay, and I'm gonna stay in the same chair. Okay, so, let me then ask, General Counsel Blue to talk about, item 6A, the small business impact statement, relative to the medication update regulations.
So as the commission will recall, at our last meeting, we brought before you the revised medication regulations along with our local government advisory council cover letter. We have since sent off those regulations to the local government advisory council. They are looking at them, and their 14-day review is complete on Thursday the 5th, which would be tomorrow. So public comment technically could start on the 6th. But the small business impact statement that goes along with those regulations needs to go to the Secretary of State by September the 12th. And this is the meeting most close to that date. So we're asking you to review today the small business impact statement for those regulations. It is a fairly basic small business impact statement based upon the regulations. We have identified the groups of small businesses that may be impacted, and those are trainers, owners, veterinarians. We spell out the fact that we believe they don't require any additional work by those parties. These are the regulations that we are proposing, are regulations, the basis of which is already in place. There's no additional paperwork necessarily, it just sets up different penalties. So we would ask that you review the small business impact statement and authorize us to file it at the appropriate time.
All right, any questions or discussion about that? It's at tab 6A.
6A.
Yeah.
I just had a question on 5, whether that needs to be stipulated. It's, as I understand it, we're adding these regulations to create a more uniform playing field across several jurisdictions. I think that's what the reference is to, but
We can certainly make that change. That is what it is designed to reference, so we can add that it's across multiple jurisdictions.
Is there, yeah. Okay, any other questions?
no.
Then with that addition, is there a motion to accept and authorize the filing with the Secretary of State of the Small Business Impact Statement.
So moved.
Second,
And there's a second, yeah.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously. That was slick.
You get bonus points for
All
just
right.
moving stuff along.
Yeah. Director Day, do you want to, do we want to talk about the process piece of the next item, or leave the next item entirely for Friday? Phase 3 regulation update has two subparts, process and policy, and the policy questions we are going to hold till Friday, so.
The process was just, probably shouldn't go together because the process was just to remind everybody of how long
How long it's gonna take.
it's gonna
Right.
take as we
Yeah.
move forward.
Okay, so let's reserve that until Friday. We'll post in our modified posting that we'll continue the ombudsman's report, and we will take up item 6B on the current agenda, and that's the Friday agenda. Is that right? Okay,
Sounds correct to me.
okay,
Yes.
good. Then with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Is there a need to adjourn this meeting if we
ah,
not adjourned?
Then I will, very
You
good
were,
catch, good
you will
catch.
continue it until
Yeah.
Friday.
So we will now recess this meeting until Friday at 1:30 PM.